to this week's episode. We are focused on the eighth pillar of the Scale Your Small Business system, and that is review. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a time in your life like this, but I feel like I'm kind of in this season of doing all the things, running around with my hair on fire. And I think it's important to recognize that if you don't take time to pause and review what's going on, you can't move forward. It makes it so difficult to effectively plan for the future if you haven't reflected on the past. And so taking time out of your busy schedule to do that, I find so helpful. One of the ways that I do this is on a quarterly basis. So if you follow it along, you know that I plan on a quarterly basis, but I also take time to reflect quarterly because it's so important to make sure that I'm reviewing everything that I did this past quarter, but also taking time to look forward about what's the new plan because things evolve and change. I also have my whole year mapped out. Now, that doesn't mean that things can't change because they always do, but it's good to have an idea of what's going on every single month, a big overall picture. That way, I'm not cramming a ton of stuff into January and realizing there's no physical way that I can do it, and then in turn, letting people down because that is not something that you ever want to do. It's not a good feeling. So, we're talking about annually reviewing. We're talking about quarterly reviewing. And if you are thinking to yourself, girl, you are crazy. I don't even have enough time to go to the bathroom, let alone review my quarter, then I've got something that might be super helpful for you. It's a weekly review, and it's something that I created when I'm feeling stressed and rushing around that I think is super important and really allows you to take the time to just do a couple things. And I made it into a handy dandy PDF. So I'm going to run through it really quick with you because I really think that it might help improve your life. Now, if you were one of those people that was like, there is no way I've got time to review my quarter, let alone my year, I don't have time for that, I'm in a super busy season of life. If you've got 5 minutes, there's a couple things that I think are super important for you to do. One being to clean up your area. If you are surrounded by a giant mess, and maybe you're not ADD, ADHD like I am, so this might not affect you. But if you are, I encourage you to clean up your space because this could make a huge difference for you and you might not even realize how much stuff is piled up around your desk that you're working in this weensy little area of your desk rather than clearing and making way to have a nice clean desktop. It could be huge for you. Next up, once you're cleaning, you're like, I don't have time to go through everything. You put it in a pile. Now that might be in the very corner of your desk, like I do right now. There's a little pile there waiting for me to go through it. You might also find a bin or a basket or something like that to just put everything into, and then you can go through it on a weekly basis. Some sort of container, I feel like, makes a huge difference on this because that way you don't have stuff sliding off your desk if you're moving it up and down like I am on my automatic desk here, but just finding a place to corral everything can make a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be a fancy container either. It could be a shoebox. It's just anything you've got laying around. This one is something that I've started doing almost every day because I feel like that my brain is clogged with all the things that are coming and happening and, everything that's going on in my life. I feel like brain dumping everything gives me a different level of self-control. Now, what's great about a brain dump is that then things are no longer living in my head. It's usually pretty quick when I do it too because I've been doing it every day. So normally there's only a couple things that are hanging around in my head that need to be jotted down on a piece of paper, but it's in a safe place. I know it's there, I can come back to it, and it has really helped me with my stress levels during this super busy time. So if you're feeling any of those emotions as well, I encourage you to just get a notebook and start scribbling things down every day. Now, here's kind of the key that I have found by doing this practice every day is that there are some things that are automatically going to pop out of your head because you've been thinking about them, stewing over them, maybe even festering over them. But as you continue this process, make sure that you're allowing yourself time after you write down the obvious stuff. So what I've been doing is just, putting everything down and then giving myself an extra 5 minutes of quiet time to just see if anything else up rises up to the top that might be mentally causing me fatigue, but I might not realize it. And I think that's the most important thing. So making sure that you give yourself enough time to jot those things down and then do it the next day. And it starts to become a habit that has really been helpful for me. And so I do it every day, but this is just for the weekly review checklist. So if you don't find that daily works for you, just make sure that you're doing it every week. Now we're going to jump into the 15-minute category. So the 3 things that I mentioned before, those were if you have 5 minutes in your day to do. This one is 15 minutes. Now keep in mind, we're going to talk about a bunch of different time frames, and depending on when you do your weekly review, you might find that you only have 5 minutes in the beginning, or you might find yourself working up to get all of these things done, as well as I'd love your feedback if you have anything to add to this list, because I've got some comments from earlier presentations that I've done that I'm going to share with you that I think are super important to add to your list as well. Just things that people have mentioned to me. So jumping back into that 15-minute time slot, we're going to review our calendar or our planner pages. We want to look back at the last week and see if there's anything that we missed. Is there potentially something that someone is waiting on for you to turn in? We don't want to keep people waiting, but at the same time, if you've got emails, coming in every 30 seconds, it's really hard to maintain that while working on other stuff. So just to follow up to make sure that you're not missing anything, as well as looking at the next week's planner pages to kind of get an idea of what's coming in the week ahead and how to plan accordingly for that. You want to reply and also empty your voicemail. Now, this is a big one for me too, because I tend to just respond to voicemails and then leave them in my inbox and they stack up. I have no idea why I do that. It's just a bad habit, one that I'm working on. So every week I make sure that I am listening to voicemails and deleting them out of my inbox. And just like reviewing your calendar pages, you want to make sure that you're emptying out your voicemail and returning anything that someone might be waiting on. This next one is a big one and sometimes a scary one. If you have followed along from the very beginning of my journey, you know that I was one of those people that had over 50,000 emails. It was a lot. And I needed help, and I got that help. But now that I am close to being at inbox 0 almost every day, it's something that I want to look back over the week, make sure that I've answered everything, responded to everything, followed up on anything, making sure that no one is waiting for me on anything, because the longer you let this go, the bigger the monster becomes. And if you're someone who's in that boat that I used to be on with the 50,000 emails, it can be daunting. The best thing that I can say is to sort out all the junk first. That's the easiest thing, and then go back to all your emails that are of importance and make sure that you're sorting those just to make it easier. I've got loads of podcasts where I've done on email organization, and I really encourage you to check that out if this is something that you're struggling with, because it can be a real game changer for you. So the last one in the 15-minute time slot is to remember to reply to text messages. Now, this one I feel like I'm really good at. If someone sends me a text, I immediately respond back. It's just easy for me. But I have friends and family who get text messages and the text message just sit there. Or maybe they've read the text message but got distracted by something and never responded back. So this is just like all the other things that I mentioned, going back through those text messages and make sure that you respond, because someone sent you a text for a reason and probably needs your response to something. So add that to the list with the calendar, the email, the voicemail, and the text messages. Get all that stuff wrapped up in your weekly review. We're going to jump over to the 30-minute time slot. So if you are able to carve out 30 minutes a week into your schedule, you want to do everything that we talked about in the 5 minutes and the 15 minutes, but now we're going to add some extra things to it to include a full 30-minute time slot. Remember that pile of paper that we talked about that was over on the corner of your desk? Now's the time to sort it into piles. And I feel the easiest way to do this is to sort like with like. So, for instance, if you have bills that need to be sorted through, you have shred that needs to be sorted through, and right now it's all living in the same pile, you can go through and sort out bills to be paid, what needs to be shredded, what needs to be recycled, and what needs your attention. Having those separate piles keeping them small. And listen, if you're overwhelmed by 4 piles, just do one at a time. If you can only go through and pick out all the mail out of your pile, that's okay. Put everything back in one pile and just focus on the mail once you've got it sorted out. A lot of times, this stuff is all about baby steps. And I think so often we think, I've got to get this massive project done. If I don't get this big pile of stuff done, I'm an absolute failure. When really it's a win that you were able to sort through that massive pile and pull out all your bills and make sure that they got paid that day. That is still a win. You've got to give yourself those small baby steps as accomplishments, because if you don't, you'll get bogged down and that pile will just grow and grow. Another one that I like to do if I have 30 minutes is to write out my to-do list. This is so helpful to me because sometimes things can get bogged down in emails, voicemails, texts. I mean, there's so many different ways that people can communicate with us these days. It's very hard to keep that organized. And so writing that weekly to-do list, it allows me to reflect back on my brain dumps that I mentioned earlier, making sure that I'm not forgetting everything. I want to make sure that I'm trusting this system so that way I'll continue to use it. Because if you don't trust your system, you're not going to use it. You'll think that it's going to let you down and you'll revert back to keeping everything in your head, which we already know is not working at all. During this time, I always like to review my previous week's to-do list. And I think that's important because there are inadvertently going to be some things that just don't get accomplished. There's just not enough time in the day. And so I want to make sure that if those things can be moved to this week, or if they need to be moved to the following week, it's totally okay. We just want to make sure that those items are getting done eventually. Now we're going to jump into the 60-minute time frame. Now, this is something that you probably should work up to. Don't feel overwhelmed that you've got to carve out 60 minutes tomorrow. Just know that this is something that you're going to build up to. So you're going to start with 5, 15, 30, and then up to 60. This took me a while to get to, but eventually I made it there. And a lot of this stuff that I do in the 60-minute time frame is some of my favorites. One of those is reviewing my project list. So I have a notebook where I list all my projects, all of the tasks that are associated with those projects, and I'm consistently going back and scheduling those tasks on my calendar. But I want to check in with those projects and make sure that I'm still on track. Am I where I need to be? Because sometimes, again, with the distractions, you forget things or forget, oh my gosh, I've got to get that done this week because so-and-so is expecting it next week. So make sure that you're moving forward every single week on your projects list if you have one. And this for me is the best way to do it. I also take a look at my someday maybe list. This is something that I check and see if there's anything that I can move into any of the weeks. And sometimes there's not. Someday maybe list, if you're not familiar with it, is just a place. Think of it like a parking lot of ideas, books you'd like to read, podcasts you'd like to listen to, vacations you might like to take. Anything that you want to do in the future, this list is a great place to put it. Because again, getting things out of your head, because that is never a good place to keep things, and onto a list like this will really help free up mental space for you and create less stress because you're not trying to juggle and spin all the plates at once. You know you've got a system that works where those ideas are safe and you can come back and check on them. Here's an important one. You want to schedule your next weekly review. Find a time when you can carve out some time in your schedule to get this session on the calendar. Now, I know that you have heard research of people that say you need to schedule your workouts just like you would a client appointment. This is exactly the same thing with the weekly review. You want to make sure that it's on your calendar. I do mine on Sundays, but that might not work for you. So pick the time that works best for your schedule and your life and get it on your calendar. Even if it's just 5 minutes. The act of putting it on the calendar and making sure that you show up and do the 3 things I mentioned will be the snowball that starts to roll and gain momentum as you work up towards the 60-minute mark. If you've got time within this 16 minutes, what I do is always update my software. So if there's any updates that need to be done on my phone, my iPad, my computer, any device that I have that needs an update, this is the time that I start that process, because those things can sneak up on you until it becomes almost a dangerous situation where you've missed an update that had a patch for a bug fix, or, something like that. You want to make sure that those updates are done consistently. So if you're not doing them as soon as they pop up on your computer automatically, make sure you're carving out time to get those things going. So that way, every week you have a computer that is completely up to date. Also, phone, iPad, Apple Watch, whatever you've got, any device, make sure that you're getting it updated. The last thing I'll mention that you can do during these 60 minutes, which I feel like is something so small, but it can really set you on the right path, and that's emptying your trash. Now, I work with a lot of clients, and sometimes they're so overwhelmed that just even taking out the trash can be huge. So, what I would encourage you to do if you're in that spot where you're just so overwhelmed with everything that you have going on is pick up your trash can and move it to the doorway. If you feel the need to pull that trash can liner out and take it out to the garage or your garbage can, absolutely do it. But again, those small wins can make a huge difference. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, even walking into your office space and you're like, I just can't do anything, go get your garbage can and move it to the door. That's it. Sometimes those small steps can really propel you forward, and I want to make sure that you're not discounting that, because progress is progress. Even if it's small, little tiny baby steps, it's still progress. Make sure that you share with me your feedback on the weekly review process. I've got some other things that I'm going to mention, but I would love to hear what you would add to your weekly review. One person mentioned that they thought it was a great idea to check their draft email folder. Now, I think that's great, because have you ever started an email, got distracted by something, and thought you sent the email, but turns out you didn't? It's just been sitting in your drafts. What a great way to double check that and make sure that all the emails you sent actually got sent. Another person mentioned that they like to take their weekly review and gather all their planners, they have multiples, and get everything set up for the week. So essentially like a weekly reset. So they're kind of looking over everything. They're looking at all their children's calendars, their calendars. They're making sure that everything is written down and organized and in the same place. Because how frustrating is it when you're trying to find your keys, when you're in a hurry, you got to get out the door, you're almost running late, and you can't find your keys. So this person thought it was a really good idea to organize everything. So planners and backpacks, laptop, everything ready to go for their workday, organized right by the front door. So that way they didn't have to worry about the last minute morning rush. Everything was packed up and ready to go. If you've got other ideas, I would love to hear from you. Make sure that you shoot me a DM on Instagram or reply to the comments below this video. I would love to hear what you're thinking. All those comments that you give me, I share with the community, and it just makes us better all together. Make sure that you come back next week when we're going to be talking about the Q&A for this episode. I would love to know if you have tried any of these things, what your feedback is on them, and how you think we could make this process better.